Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We have gone through all the position groups on the offensive side of the ball prior to this show, and now we're going to move over to the defensive side of the ball, and we're going to start up front with the nose tackle group for the Seahawks here. And if we have time, we might bleed into the defensive end group, but we're going to try to focus here on the very interior of the defensive lineman at the nose tackle spot. Welcome in, Keith.
Yeah, the nose tackle spot. If there is a weakness on the Seahawk team, this is it. This is, in my opinion, the weakest position group on the entire roster. And you'll see as we get into this, there's a lot of guys for a spot that's essentially one spot on the field. Two, maybe three on the roster. There's a bunch of guys that are competing for those spots, but there's not a single proven player amongst them. And that's a rough spot to be in if you're Seattle.
So, yes. And Brian Monet is coming off an injury where he had 80, in his career, he's got 85 combined tackles with 75 coming in the last two seasons. There's where the experience lies in this group. Now, when we talked about this right before we push record, the team brought on Jerron Reed this year. I expect him to play the 3-tech spot on the line, but there is opportunities there depending on matchups, depending on passing downs and so forth, where he could slide inside. He has done that prior, and maybe that's a name that we should consider as well. And then we drafted a young kid too. But let's talk about Brian Monet. So at the traditional nose tackle spot, that was occupied by Poona Ford and Al Woods last year. Al Woods is more of a traditional guy at over 330 pounds. Poona Ford's on the light side, more of a 3-tech in this defense. Nonetheless, it was asked to play nose tackle quite a bit, and it actually does well at that. But not great, because let's be honest, our run defense last year was horrendous. They elected to move on from those guys and push the reset button. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about Brian Monet, because what are the expectations about Brian Monet this year, especially with the knee injury? It doesn't even seem like he's going to be in training camp.
Yeah, I don't know. He's a guy that he's coming back from the knee injury. He missed like all of last year, and he's still it was a bad injury. He's still recovering, and when you're 300 and they list him at 345 pounds. I know when he first signed with Seattle, he was 365. When you're that big and you have a knee injury, like it's just really hard to get back, because that's a lot of strain and a lot of stuff, and you have to be able to trust it. And it's also got to be strong enough. And so we'll see where he's at in his recovery. I'd like to think that he'll be ready for the start of the year, but until they get into training camp and we get some updates, we don't know. He is a huge monster of a man, but he doesn't offer the quickness or anything to do much against the pass. He's just a huge space eater guy who looks like he's 360 pounds.
Let me ask you this.
Hard to move.
So, something was wrong with Seattle's defense last year. I don't know if it was scheme, coaching, players. We just weren't able to stop teams from running on us, quite frankly, or passing it,
passing.
But mostly it was, one of the pillars of Pete Carroll's defense is stopping the run first and foremost, and force teams to be one-dimensional. We just weren't able to do that. Now, it also affects the way that linebackers can play as well and come up and make plays. And quite a few of our linebacker tackles were past the line of scrimmage. Where do you put Brian Monet in that equation, Keith? We saw Poona Ford struggle at times, playing slightly out of position for him. We saw Al Woods maybe wear down a little bit, although Al Woods was, I think, the best interior defensive line player we had last year, which was still middle of the pack as far as the NFL is concerned. Where do you put Brian Monet?
Well, of those 3 guys, Monet has always been the 3rd. He's, was the weakest of the 3. Now, most of what we saw with that was in a 4-3, right? Because last year was the first year they really went to the 3-4. And in a 4-3, um, responsibilities are a little different. I mean, that's Poona Ford was great when they were in a 4-3. When they went to the 3-4, it was like he was playing out of position.
Yeah, when he's
Because
attacking, Poonaford's great.
yeah. And that really is probably why they, let him move on to Buffalo. Um, in a 3-4, we haven't seen much of Brian Monet because he was hurt last year. And so I don't really know what he's going to be able to do. I like to think his body type and everything that he's a guy that should excel as a 3-4 nose tackle, more so than in a 4-3. But until we see it, I can't say that he is he's the guy. I mean, we just don't know at this point.
Well, he did have quite a few tackles this last season, I think 48 or whatever from that spot. So, and then let's go on to Cameron Young. So
Yeah.
we drafted this kid, 6'3", 320 pounds, Mississippi State, 4th round. We had talked about defensive tackle possibly being either the first or second um, position of need on this defense, and they waited until the 4th round to address it. Talk to me about the draft strategy of Seattle. Then talk to me about the player and what they see in him.
Well, I mean, when you look at draft strategy, they didn't want to reach for a guy. So they didn't like Carter because of all of his off field issues. So they passed on him. When you look at 20, Kalijah Cansey had gone off the board at 19. He would have been the perfect guy to come in. Now he's not a nose tackle, but he's still a defensive tackle. He's a 3 tech. He would have been the perfect guy there, but he went off the board at 19. And then you're looking at reaching. Do you go reach for a Brian Breesy or a Mozzie Smith? And I think that they believed it was just too early for those guys and it wasn't value. So they waited, and then, different things happened as they went down, and Keanu Benton was an option at one point, but um, they liked other players more. And so they just kind of waited on it, and they waited until the 4th round in order to go get a guy that they like. Um, Cameron Young was 6'3", 304 coming into this. The team said, "Hey, put on some weight. You're going to be a nose tackle." He's now 6'3", 320. He'll probably be 325 when they enter camp. Um, Maybe 330, but I don't know. We'll see if he can put on more weight. It's hard to keep it on at that point when you're working out that hard. But um,
So
he's a little.
what do you think about him moving around a little bit, or moving away from a position that he's been used to and coming into a defense from scratch? It seems to me, based on the current roster construction, that they're really depending on this kid to come in and kind of lock that spot down, especially with the question marks on Monet's knee.
Yeah, honestly, like, you look at kind of the stuff that they asked him to do in college, and there's a lot of overlap, and so I'm not really concerned about that. I think it's just a matter of, um, you can get away with being 304 nose tackle in college, you can't in the pros. You've gotta be, 320, minimum,
In a 3-4.
yeah, in the 3-4, because you gotta be that guy that's, you aren't moved. You can stand up to a double team, and even if you're not gonna get penetration against the double team, but you're also not gonna get pushed backwards, so that um, the combo block, the center of the guard, whichever one is gonna release up to the, linebackers, has to stay on you for another second, which keeps the linebackers free so they can come up and make a tackle. And so they just need him to be bigger. But he is a massive person. He is just um,
And
Pete
long.
Carroll. Yeah, Pete Carroll and talked about him having the biggest back on the team, right? And anybody was said he told Clint Hurt that we finally got someone with as big a back as you have,
Yeah.
and because it's muscle, and he's as big and he's a strong kid, and I honestly think that he's your starting nose tackle going into the year, which as a rookie, it's you're a little like, oh, that's a fourth round pick. We'll see what happens there, but he's the best. He's the most talented potential option, significantly more than anyone else. So he's the guy, and they're putting a lot of pressure on him to come in and win that job, do a good job there. Because if he comes in and fails, if he's just not up to the task yet, there's not much left on this roster unless Monet is healthy.
I think one of the important things to recognize here is what Seattle recognizes with this kid, which is not necessarily privy to us in the draft process, is the mental side of this pick.
Yes.
The grit, the tenacity, the self awareness, the ability to mentally take on double teams at the NFL level, all that kind of stuff. And he is
Hmm.
that. He's ready to
Yep.
go. Clint Hurt loves this kid already. They loved him throughout the draft process and hoped that they had an opportunity to draft him. They did. He's got the physical ability. I don't think that that's the question. The question of can he be successful in the NFL, and that part comes with his grit and tenacity and fight and character and all that kind of stuff. And that's where he checks all the boxes.
Yeah, and I've got pretty dang high hopes for this kid. I think that um, overall, this is the guy that we need more than anyone um, to step up because, like on the offensive line, where we were expecting a couple rookies to come in and make a major impact, there are veterans there. Um, if the rookies fail, this Seahawk defense is going to struggle if Cameron Young can't step in and perform.
Yeah. I think there's opportunities depending on pass heavy teams. So this kid's probably, more of a run stuffer,
Hmm.
probably going to come off the field. He's going to play a two down player, at least
Yep.
initially, depending on how he goes. And the Seahawks will then transition to somebody like Jerron Reed. We've talked about that, or Dre Jones, who they brought in from Denver in the offseason. Guys that are playing three tech would be able to slide inside. They just go with three tech guys on passing downs.
Yep.
Jerron Reed has enough experience and girth. He's 313 himself to be able to come in and kind of hold that thing down on passing downs. And then they've got a whole host of other guys as well. And in particular, Mike Morris is an interesting name to kind of keep aware of in this process. I think he kind of comes on throughout the year and earns more playing time. And he's a guy that might be able to also take that third down spot too, because he defends the run really well. So, if you've got a third down run play and Mike Morris is in there, no problem. And
I
he's
don't
just going
know.
to have,
He defends the run really well as a five tech, but
yes,
as a
but
nose tackle,
they're asking him to put on additional weight. So he's another player that they've asked to put on a little bit of weight. He came in at 290 into camp, mini camp. And
hmm
I think that they want him
he was
around
up from
300 or whatever.
well, yeah, he was up from 273 in the
Yes.
draft process up to
Yes.
390. They want him to put
Which
on a
is
little
where
bit
he
more.
played at Michigan. He played at around the 390 range. He'd
Yeah,
lost weight to go into the draft so he could become a little bit more, test well, and he did
yeah,
that.
he wanted to test well, and he wanted to show versatility that he can be a little bit lighter and be more of an upfield guy than just an edge setter. And so he did that, showed that, and the Seahawks go, yeah, that's great and all, but we want you back where you were. And he goes, okay, and did that. He is a guy that will when they get into third and long, other teams are in third and long. There's going to be a lot of guys that can come in and play
Right.
nose tackle and take over for Young because you're right. Young's going to come off the field in those situations because he's not an upfield, penetrator, get pressure on a quarterback guy. He's in eat space, make life a living hell for centers and
Right.
guards in the running game.
And give Bobby Wagner a chance to make all the tackles. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's and but you there where's the road? I mean, you last year you had Puna and you had Al Woods, and at the beginning of the season you had Brian Monet, um, all getting snaps at the nose tackle spot. You've got Cameron Young.
Yeah.
where's your
Yeah.
L Woods?
I don't think he's on the team yet, but that's just my opinion. Okay.
Yeah.
So Brian Monet, we don't know when he's gonna come back. He may be available for the first game, but he was injured later in the year. So chances are he's probably gonna be it scratched the first 8 games off the schedule, and Brian Monet might be potentially back midseason. That's
Mhm.
me. Don't have any information on that for sure. Cameron Young, you mentioned that. We've also got some undrafted rookie free agents and a seasoned kind of a guy that's been around a roster or two in the NFL in Forrest Merrill. He's age 26. I think he's been on um, 2 practice squads in the last couple of years, but still yet to see the field. 6'1", 338 pounds, squatty bowling ball type guy. Um, he's going to be in the mix in training camp. Austin Theo Louis is an undrafted guy at Oregon State this last year, 6'3", 292, undersized, yet they want to have him play between the nose tackle and 3 tech. So I would imagine he's going to be in an off-season program somewhere, whether it's with the Seahawks or not, to bulk up a little bit around that. And we can talk
They have
about him a little bit more.
they have 4 guys listed at nose tackle.
Yeah.
Um, and one of them is Forrest Merrill, who you mentioned, who doesn't have length. There's
Yes.
he's
He's a bowling
big,
ball.
6'1", 338. He's big, but he's not getting playing time because he doesn't have the length, and so he has a hard time keeping the guards and centers' arms from getting in on his body. He just doesn't have that length to get in and push them away. So he's blockable is basically what it comes down to. Um, the other 3 guys that are listed at nose tackle are small. You mentioned wait, Theolio?
Yeah.
Uh, Okay. Um, and he's 292.
Yeah.
And I think what you've got these 3 guys that are in the mold of, hey, we need someone who can play that spot on 3rd down, on 3rd and long, in the 2-minute drill when the other team's throwing the ball in and they've got 3 guys that they're looking at. 2 of them are undrafted rookies. One of them's been around the league for a year, and they're gonna give him a shot. Say,
Yeah.
are any of you ready to step in and earn some snaps there?
Like Jonah Tavai. Everyone in Seahawks Twitter is in love with this guy. He's got great production at with the Aztecs, San Diego State, 6 foot 290. They like him though at that weight, to between 290 and 300. A
Mhm.
very short stature kind of guy, bowling ball, 6 foot, not long, not super athletic, but he's been very productive, very productive. Let me see. In 2022, 12 games, 665 snaps, 30 tackles, 20 assists, 33 stops. As a pass rusher, tallied 61 total pressures, 39 quarterback hurries, 12 quarterback hits, and 10 sacks. His 2021 production was very similar, 40 quarterback hurries, 11 hits, 10 sacks. So very productive at that level of college football. And so they're kind of excited about this kid. He's a little bit raw, obviously, needs to learn, needs to bulk up a little bit. Um, but his first step quickness is what they really like.
Yeah, they do, and he reminds me a little bit of, Quentin Jefferson as a rookie,
I thought you were
who
going to say Puna Ford.
no, he reminds me more of Quentin Jefferson as a rookie who was undersized for a nose tackle, and you're like, "Why are they playing him there?" And that doesn't make a lot of sense, and, um, but they wanted him as a pass rusher on the inside, a third down pass rusher, not, get 12 snaps a game, and his only responsibility is to get up the field. And I think it's a good role for him as he's starting. Now, Puna Ford might have been the same height at 5'10", 5'11". Puna Ford, I think, was 6 foot, but um, Puna was also 320. This guy's 280. So
I don't think
that
Puna was 320 when he came in. I think he was like closer to 3.
he was at least north of 3, whereas Tavai's at 280. And so he's a just a different kind of kid. He's productive. Was really productive against lower quality, opponents. We'll see what translates.
Yeah.
If that translates at 5'10", you know, sure he's got natural leverage, but can he keep the guards and centers from blocking him? The same thing we were talking about with Merrill, right? He just doesn't have the length. Can he use that quickness to get in on the body of the guards um, before they can extend? And if he can, then he has a chance to be productive in the NFL. And if he just doesn't get that first step in either into the gap or at least into the body of um, the offensive lineman, he's going to really struggle. So we'll see.
The last guy on the list was Latrell Bumpus, 6'2", 285. So you're definitely an undrafted out of Tennessee. You're right in that they have a certain type. They've got
Hmm.
our big Cameron Young and Brian Monet, um, and then you've got all these undersized guys. So there's definitely a method to the madness. But the question is, what are they going to do going into the season? And that's why I said I don't know that there's necessarily that rotation guy that's on the roster yet, unless one of these young kids just steps up. Um, but they don't have that like nose tackle guy, that rotation guy. Brian Monet is probably not going to start the season, so you've got one guy that's playing nose tackle for the. It's just not going to work. So I think that they're going to
Hmm.
definitely bring somebody in. We talked about the offensive line group in the last few shows. We talked about Phil Haynes and possibly maybe if the rookies come in and outperform, there might not be a roster spot for Phil Haynes at his cap number. And I was saying, well, maybe they use that cap number, A, and B, roster spot that normally would go to a guy like Phil Haynes, and you get a defensive tackle on this roster because I still think that you mentioned the fact that this is the most worrisome position group and lack of depth on this roster. And I think that they still need to go out and find somebody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you mentioned Haynes. I think another spot would be corner, where they're now six deep at corner. Um, and one of those guys isn't going to make the roster, right?
And you add the factor of like a guy like Love, who's a hybrid safety, can play like 3 or 4 different positions for you in this defense.
Yeah. Um, and so there's a chance that one of those guys is expendable and tradable. And if you can, go get a rotational nose tackle, someone that can come in and basically do what Al Woods has done the last couple of years, um, then you're setting yourself up, to be successful. Um, we kind of just like glossed over Bumphus. Do you know he played tight end in college?
No,
He
didn't
was
know that.
he was a defensive tackle slash nose tackle slash tight end, um, and was a two-way player and had
Wow.
the athleticism and stuff to, um, yeah, to play tight end. And
Blocking tight end,
um,
I would assume.
yes, although he did have a couple, I think he had a couple of touchdowns
Oh, that's funny. Wow.
in his career, which when you get a guy like that, the reason why he's catching touchdowns is because no one is expecting him to go out into pattern, and so no one's covering him. But at the same time, like, I will he ever play tight end for Seattle? Probably not, but it's a fun story.
Well, let me ask you this. So let's get serious about this situation. Seattle was dismal last year defending the run and
Yes, they
and
were.
overall weakness on the defensive line. Now, it seems like they've addressed the exterior portions of the defensive line and the edge positions, but
Mhm.
yet did not really completely adequately address, at least till this very moment, almost June 1st of the offseason at this position in a 3-4 defense, which
Or
means that the nose tackle is one of the most critical pinnacle points in a defense,
mhm.
where everything else kind of works off of that. Why do you think that that is?
I think it's just, um, they were very limited in terms of cap space and stuff because they had to get Geno signed, and that was gonna be expensive, which it was. It's still a team-friendly deal, and I'm not trying to say that they overpaid him, because if anything, he's underpaid, but,
Trey
based on the
Jones
amount.
is, is the other guy.
Yeah, but based on, the amount of cap space that they had and the number of needs that they had, right? Um, those 2 guys ate up a lot of the cap space, and there wasn't a lot to go around, and then the draft just kind of fell in a way where they didn't go get, an instant player, a guy like, Mozzie Smith comes to mind as a guy that they
Or
think they
Keanu
would
Benton. Yeah.
yeah, a guy that you could just stick in there and know. Instead, they waited a little bit and got their guy, but he wasn't
I
until
think
the
they
4th
they
round.
still got their guy, but nonetheless, that's just not enough. No,
Yeah, they
to
still need
me,
another.
why didn't they just go get Al Woods back? Just, they you pay Al Woods the same amount that he got paid, with Buffalo, and you just go into the season knowing at least you're covered. Now
Um,
you're going in with question marks still on a team where your roster is essentially put together before training
yeah,
camp.
I was a little surprised that either him or Puna didn't get brought back, and I think it was just a matter of timing and money that, they got offers from other teams, um, and the Seahawks weren't ready. They didn't know what they had. They didn't know what their needs were, and they knew that they weren't ready to make that call. And now they're not there because they went. But also in this defense, neither of those guys is like, oh my god, we can't exist without them. Right?
It's
They're
true.
nice. They're pieces, but they were also the pieces that were there last year when the defense was terrible. So um, it's one of those things where the known, because they're known, it would make us feel more comfortable. But remember, they were there last year when that aspect of the defense, the run defense specifically, was bad. And so you're bringing those guys back. You're paying a certain amount of cap space for them to not improve. And I don't think that's what the team wanted to do. I think they wanted to get younger, get cheaper, get hungrier, and hopefully get better. And they may or may not have done that in this year, but I think the idea is, you know, you've said it before. This is year 2 of a 3-year rebuild. The offense is set. The defense is a year away, but should be there next year. Um, so they're just getting themselves set up and um, having your backup nose tackle might not be the position
Well,
that you're worried
okay.
about in year
Oh,
2 of a rebuild.
I'm going to disagree. I agree with that, and I've said those things. Yes, I agree with that. I'm going to disagree with you and push back just a little bit in that the offense is so good, and the defense is taking care of almost every position group except for this. So if you're really only one player away to being a potentially top 10 defense, but I'm just saying potentially, with the back end's really good, the edge rushers appear to be good. Bobby Wagner's back in the middle. We've got a great safety group. This is it. This is the spot that's the weakness. If you got Cameron Young, you feel good about him, but you're just one player away, you better go get that done and go
Do you
into the
really think
offseason with
you think this defense is one player away?
a
'Cause
good
I don't.
defensive tackle, a good nose tackle.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm I don't.
Yeah, I do, and the reason I say that is look at the back end. I'll take I'll set our secondary. Let's lump the defensive backs and corners or corners and safeties together. That those groups are competing with anybody in the NFC.
Uh,
You
don't
take a look at
don't
our
don't
linebackers
don't
with
lump them together
okay,
and tell
we've
me
got the
that this.
best safety group in the NFC.
I
We've
don't agree
got
with that. I don't
potentially
agree with that
now
at
with
all.
you've got Love. Julian Love is the top 10 safety in this league. And he came in free agency. You've got Diggs, who led the NFL for safeties and interceptions the last 3 seasons.
Yeah,
Right?
and
And
both
then
of
you've
those are
got
both of
and
those are free
Jamal
safeties
Adams.
who
I
has not
know
played
Julian
in
Love is
3
a is
years.
a is a hybrid. Both of them are kind of hybrid, but Julian Love's a hybrid. Now, yes, we need a traditional strong safety. We've got potentially Jamal Adams coming back. Who knows? If Jamal Adams is healthy, that trio is legit, dude. And then you take a look at Witherspoon, top 5 pick, with Tariq Woolen. Come on, and then you've
No,
got
I said
a trio of
at
backups there at
corner.
corner.
At corner, they're in great shape. I don't agree with the safety call. I
Okay,
like Diggs. I think Love
I think
is is
you're low on Love, dude.
I'm
You go watch Love play, and he's going to fit this defense so well. It's going to be
well,
amazing.
there's a reason why the market for him was limited,
There's a reason
and
the market's limited for all safeties, but yes.
True, but Seattle still is paying $18 million for a guy a year for a guy that doesn't play, and at
It's
safety, and that's
potentially
part of the problem.
possible. I
And
don't know that his all his injuries are related. We'll see what happens this year. I like Jamal Adams a little bit better than you do, but not nearly as much as I should to be comfortable with that situation.
yeah,
So I agree with you
so
there. And then
between
hold on,
that
what?
middle
Wait, I'm not
linebacker
done
is a
yet. Yeah.
problem.
Oh,
Middle
come on. Jordan Brooks comes back along
at
with
midseason, sure,
with Bobby Wagner. Dude, that's legit.
not until
That's
midseason.
and then, Bush is there and you've got they really like Radigan and a couple others. Okay. And then you take a look at the edge group that we have. 3 techs and 5 techs. Dude, that group is potentially could be very explosive for this team. I'm not going to name every player, but and we're going to get to
No,
that in the next show, but
but
it's pretty good.
the defense has great players on the edges. The 3-4 outside linebackers, I like. The defensive ends, I like. The cornerbacks, I freaking love. Up the middle, the defense is weak. They're weak at nose tackle. They're weak at middle linebacker. And yes, I'm including Bobby Wagner in that thing because he's one player who has to now count for two because it's a 3-4 and there needs to be two middle linebackers and the team has one on the roster. Um, and I'm not sold on you on these safeties. So they're just not good up the middle. They're not one player away. They're 3 or 4, and they don't have the money for that right now. They have to wait. We need another
We
offseason
might be
to
3 or
fix this
4 depth
defense.
wise, but I think starters were going to be okay. Now, the weakness is definitely nose tackle. And you said it, even with Cameron Young, that's just not enough.
Yeah,
Even if he
they need
turns out
another
to be
guy.
all world, you still got to have a guy that comes in there in a rotation. So,
They need another guy. I think the team is hoping that Brian Monet comes back, or that they can grab someone off the waiver wire that someone else's cap casualty. Um,
I think that the team is
Maybe a guy
counting.
like Al Woods, who you know, yeah, he signed with another team, but does he make it out of camp?
I think the team is secretly just counting on being athletic and fast and playing guys like Jerron Reed and Dre Jones in sliding inside more often than maybe that we should in this defense, and just calling it a hybrid defense with
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
4-3 looks with 3-4 personnel, quote unquote, is kind of the way that they like to term it. And I
I
do
wouldn't
see
slide
that.
Dre Jones in.
If you take
Why?
a look at the roster composition and you take a look at the amount of safeties we have and the amount of outside linebackers we have and the lack of having true nose tackles on this roster dictates that they're looking at this thing more of as a speed roster with
Hmm.
athleticism, and that's
They're
how they're going to
basically
approach it.
they're going to set up a. They're going to expect the offense to put up points, and then for the defense, they're going to set up the 3-4 version of a NASCAR
Because
front.
they think teams are going to have to come back.
Yeah,
You know, yeah.
and so you've got the outside pass rushers, the guys there, and when your nose tackle is Jerron Reed, who's a guy that can get 6 to 8 sacks a year, going up the middle, you're going to be okay against the pass. Against the run, you're going to struggle.
Yes.
And I think that
Yes.
unless they
And they added
if the
Dre
offense
Jones
doesn't,
and Mike Morris on the ends. They may feel like their defensive ends are really better against the runs this year as well. And so
well, they
overall,
are.
they're on a net positive.
It really comes down to, can the offense always have this team in the lead so that the defense isn't stuck trying to stop the run? Because if the
And
offense
that's a bizarre
sputters,
way of building a defensive roster,
especially for Pete Carroll, because if the offense sputters for whatever the reason,
and it will.
this te- and it will, there'll always be games when it does that, right? One here, one there, it happens. Um, how is this defense stopping the run? If another team gets a lead on Seattle, Seattle's going to have a real hard time
Early
because they're just going to be able
games,
to
early
grind
game
the ball,
scoring for this team is going to be so important. Early,
which is
early in games.
different. Um, in when Wilson was here, for the most part, this team did not do good. Um, early in games. He was a great fourth quarter player.
Yeah.
Um,
Last year we did great.
but last year, without Wilson and with Geno, the offense was best in like early parts of the game.
Yes.
When it was operating on script, it was like a machine, and they were able to get out in front of a lot of teams. And I think if they can do that again, where they're getting out in front early, then this defense, as it's constructed, might turn out to be okay because you're playing your pass rushers a lot. But if you get down, that this defense is not built to be able
Unless
to keep
Cameron
you in it.
Rung just comes in with a Pro Bowl level season and he plays 60% of the snaps,
Yeah,
65.
that's a
If he
lot
can
to
do
ask
that,
for a rookie.
I know it is, but if he can do that, this team's in pretty good shape. And you get Brian Monet back midseason. Maybe they get another guy that's a roster casualty before the season, and I think we'd be okay. But I'm lacking right now in June 1st. It's lacking.
Mhm.
I'd feel much more comfortable with this defense if we had one more guy, and
I
that's
would
why I'm
feel
saying we're just one more guy away. I'm not necessarily saying we're a Super Bowl defense with one more
'cause
guy.
we're not.
I'm saying we got to go into the season. I think with one more guy.
I think they need 2 minimum because they need another middle linebacker. They need someone, who can play that spot. Bobby's there, but do you have any faith in Bush?
Well, the
And, you know,
team seems to
Brooks is
feel
a
like Brooks is ahead of schedule, and you can't
yeah,
depend on that. And even if he was, and even if he was like 98% in June and September, um, you can't depend on him to be full speed, full strength through the first 8 weeks. He'd be
yeah,
going through the motions. Now you got Bobby Wagner next to you, but nonetheless, he's going to
yeah,
have his
but
own responsibilities.
he is, and so I love Brooks. I think he's an underrated player, but I don't expect to see him until midseason because of that injury. So that puts Bush as the guy, and I don't have any faith in Bush.
Well, nobody does yet. You know,
But
he
he
underperformed,
but
but
there's no
he's a first round pick. He just didn't live up to those expectations where he was. He was a
well,
middling linebacker.
he was a first round pick because of being super athletic. He blew out a knee and came back without a bunch of that athleticism.
True. And now
And
he's
he
2 years
hasn't
removed from that, and we'll see if he's rebounded. And if he
yeah,
has,
well,
I think he's gonna be good, especially in this defense for what he'd be asked to do, which is be dropped back into coverage more than moving upfield. I mean, lateral sideline to sideline, he's gonna make plays on the outsides, but dropping back into coverage, we'll see.
yeah, I just don't have any faith in them, and there's no depth behind that. And it's the same problem they ran into last year where they had um, Brooks and Barton and nothing behind them, and
Yeah.
it bit
Uh,
them hard
And
all
I don't
year.
understand. I'll be honest with you. I do not understand that. I do not understand how the team can make the same mistake 2 years in a row on two different position groups. I that if I've got a gripe, that would be it. I mean, Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, Devin Bush. That doesn't inspire confidence in anybody considering Brooks's injury. Now, if Brooks wasn't injured and they had Bobby Wagner and Brooks, I'd feel pretty good about that spot.
Yeah, and Bush is your primary backup that will play a bunch of special teams and come on the field occasionally. Yeah, it's
From
not too bad.
from what I've got, from what I understand, Vi Jones came into camp ready to go, like ready to compete. And I like Vi Jones in a couple different spots last year, as far as being a guy that flashed
He did.
early in training camp and so forth. So I'm interested to see where Vi Jones is at. I'm hearing
And John
that
Radigan flashed a
he's
little
like,
bit the year
yeah,
before,
and they really like John Radigan.
and Tanner Muse flashed some last year and actually got a considerable playing time after the Brooks
Yeah,
injury.
on a
And
bad
now,
defense. I mean, listen, let's be honest.
yeah,
We were ranked 27th in the NFL in overall defense last year,
y- yeah, and that's about right for the where they should have been ranked.
right?
It wasn't like there were some major issues, and there are some major issues now. I don't
Clint Hurt
think
seems to feel like he's absolutely 100% confident this defense can be better this year.
they can be better this year. They've upgraded it at 3 and 5 tech and cornerback.
And I
Um,
would argue safety. I think that Julian Love is a better player overall than what they've had last year.
than Ryan Neal?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you
Ryan
go look at
Neal,
Julian Love, dude. I'm telling you, you gotta go watch the tape. you're gonna fall in love with that player. He's really good. He's the real deal.
I would feel a lot more confident if Ryan Neal was on the roster and not Jamal Adams.
I hear you.
Um,
I hear you. Yeah. Hopefully Jamal Adams come back and play full 17 game season. Yeah,
for
let's
the first
restore the faith. Yeah,
for the
let's
fir-
find out.
for the first time in his career.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
hopefully those injuries are just unrelated. I think that he's the type of player though that gets injured because of the way he plays, and his body is just not equipped for the physicality of the NFL. But
Mhm.
I could be proven wrong. Hopefully I am. Vi Jones and Radigan though at that spot. Okay, so let's get back to the defensive tackles. So we've got two guys, Brad Monet, Cameron Young, and then a whole bunch of nothing. Really, I mean, let's be honest. These guys, the whole lot of nothing. I don't mean to disrespect those players. They haven't proven anything. A lot of undrafted guys. One guy, Forrest Merrill, who's never made it out of a practice squad candidate. So, and then Cameron Young hasn't proven anything yet.
Mhm.
He looks great on paper. That's it. Brian Monet is hurt. So that spot is just
And
not
pre
good.
and pre-injury, he was the 3rd guy at the position before. He was
Yeah.
the 3rd man on the depth chart behind, Puna and Woods.
These guys are not coming into September 1st with this roster the way it is currently right now.
I
There will
would
be
ag
another name on
I
this
would
spot.
agree with that, unless someone just comes in and blows them away. But think about, like, last year, the guy that came in and blew them away was Josh Jones, and then what happened when the regular season started?
Wow.
He went back to being the player he was before coming into Seattle's camp, and, yeah,
And
it
is
was a
no longer
problem.
on the team. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. All right. So, first of many conversations about position groups on the defense. I like the conversation. I think it gets better from here. I think this next group that we're going to talk about on the defensive end side of the equation is a really nice group. I like. It gets even better at linebacker, off ball linebacker, and edge rushers. Lot to like in those two groups, and those will be the next two shows that we have. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast, favorite podcast platform. You pick one, it's going to be there. And then our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. And we'll see you every show that we've got, usually 2 to 3 every week, even in the off season. So 52 weeks a year. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.